one of the main problems with having cystic fibrosis is that it affects your ability to breathe. And the breath is all about life. And if you can't breathe, you can't live. And, as I've studied yoga and done meditation where the breath is so important, and we learn that breath is the life force, prana is life. It challenges that will, I think, a lot. It forces you to think about breath. Mm-hmm.
And what about the breath? What does it mean to be challenged by breath?
It means you don't take it for granted when you have it. I think it means it makes you conscious of life. I think it makes you very conscious of life and how precious it is. And when you're breathing well, it's a gift, it's easy. And when you're not breathing well, you appreciate it when you can again. And so I think that is true of life as well. I think that applies all rounds in many aspects of life. When things are going well, to be aware, to be appreciative of it. And when things aren't going well, to learn to stick with it, just to keep, you have to keep breathing. I was fortunate last year. I was in sort of an intense mourning period. My beloved dog, who was also my baby, had passed away. And I kind of ran away from home and went to visit a very dear friend of mine in Victoria. And she was organizing an integrative retreat where there was guided meditation, daily yoga, counseling with a few integrative counselors, a raw food diet, which was delicious and cleansing, and also 2 plant medicine ceremonies based on the shamanic traditions from Peru. And so I participated in both of those, and that involves drinking a brew, which is known for, well, it does many things, but it's, I don't know how to describe it. Anyway, it takes you on a voyage, basically. And I had an extreme experience with it, where I actually experienced my own death. And yes, and I definitely felt a presence communicating with me, not in words so much, but in this is a lesson for you to learn. And it was a hard lesson, but it answered a lot of my questions about death and life and the importance of life and of continuing on in spite of pain. So that was one experience.
Tell me about experiencing your death.
Well, partway through the ceremony, after taking the brew, I became very, very hot and found it very, very hard to breathe. And it felt like my heart was slowing. And at one point, I went over to the shaman for assistance. And he did his thing, called on his teacher, and chanted the Icaros, specific ones, and worked on me. And his assistant also sat next to me. They're also medical Qigong practitioners. And during that whole time, I could see it was like skulls were coursing through my veins. And my interpretation of that was that Kali was, for me, that's the death goddess, having a little visit. And I struggled with it a lot and even said, I think I'm dying. And at a certain point, I stopped struggling and I just said, okay, if I'm going to go, I'm good to go. I think I'm good to go. And I was suddenly not in my body any longer. And when I became aware again, my body was flat out and felt very drained and open. And the shaman's assistant, it felt like she was holding my heart in her hands. It felt like my heart was out of my chest. And we were like that for a while. It felt like forever. And then everything became quite clear. I could see everything in the room, even though it was pitch black. And I got up feeling as light as I've ever felt and went back to my spot and spent the next week in incredible peace and seeing intense beauty everywhere. That's my story of ayahuasca.
What does it mean to you? What's the meaning you take away from that experience?
The meaning that I took away from that was, I think it was a lesson in what death is and what surrender is. And to, I'm trying to find the best way to word this. I had been in a very dark place. I had been quite convinced that I would not be able to survive without my dog. It broke my heart. And I had had heartbreak. You know, I had lost many people who I loved very dearly the preceding 2 years. And it was sort of the ultimate loss. And in that experience, I was shown that, that of course I would survive. And that death wasn't something to even think about lightly. If that makes sense. It's to not court the darkness and the despair. Mm-hmm. And that there's light. There's always light.